morning, good afternoon, one and all. Thanks for joining us in this SRE Practitioner Series. This is episode number 3. I'm so glad and happy to have Yury Nino, a cloud infrastructure engineer at Google. And she's been doing a lot of work on SRE and chaos engineering. She's got a passion around it. And we thought we would invite her to be our guest for this episode, joining us all the way from Colombia. Thank you so much, Yury, for joining us today, and I hope you're doing well and staying safe.
Yeah, I am doing well. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I am really happy to be here. Thank you for having me here. So, and thank you for everybody who are listening this episode. So thank you, Suresh, for this invitation. That is an honor for me.
Excellent. So, Yury, why don't you give your background of your journey and what made you to be interested on SRE? So tell us about a brief background and experience that you've had so many years.
Yeah, so okay, I am Yury Nino, as you mentioned. So I have been working in software development for probably 12 years. But 3 years ago, I moved to DevOps field. So because I had an special interest for backend topics, for microservices, for infrastructure. So I moved to DevOps. So at this moment, I am studying about chaos engineering. So DevOps field match with this interest. So I have probably 3 or 4 years working on DevOps topics. And regarding to chaos engineering, I joined to the community in 2017, probably 2017. So I was studying about these topics, about this discipline from this time.
Excellent. So, in your opinion, Yury, what do you need as a skill for SRE, right? What do you need if you want to be a good SRE? What are some of the skills that you would recommend that they should possess to become a good site reliability engineer?
Yeah, that is a difficult question, considering that everyone has special skills and special abilities for anything. So, but before that, I would like to share a definition of SRE, considering that if you understand what is SRE, you can understand why we need some things in order to be a good SRE. So probably you have heard a famous definition. SRE is what happens when you ask a software engineer to design an operations team. So that is a perfect field or a perfect role for software engineers and people working in operations topics. So I like to think that SRE is a framework for measurement, prioritization, and information sharing to help teams balance between the velocity of feature releases and predictable behavior of deployed services. So considering that definition, I think that a good SRE should develop technical skills related to that, related to or focus on programming languages, operating systems, managing servers. That is really important. You should manage topics or concepts related to networking, security, protocols, infrastructure as a code, automation. SREs are engineers who have software engineering experience, as well as Unix system administration and networking experience. That is a mixture of software engineering and operation and infrastructure engineering. So that is because SRE is related to automation, to infrastructure as a code, for example. So it is really important that you understand these topics and you develop skills related to the tools and techniques related with that. I am talking about, for example, you should manage Terraform, Pulumi, and Jenkins, and you should have experience with many flavors of operating system. I am talking about Windows, Linux, even mobile topics, considering, for example, Android, iOS, anything. So related to that is related to technical skills. You
Right.
should develop skills related to these topics, considering that SRE is about joining software engineering and infrastructure engineering. But that in the other side, it's really, really important to develop three skills related to soft abilities. So Benjamin Traynor, the creator or the creator of this framework in Google, talk about three critical skills for an SRE. The first one is related to automation. The second one is related to curiosity. And the third one is related to have the capability to manage complex systems, because SRE is related with distributed systems with many connections between components and with many things to trace in order to solve an issue, for example. So it is really important to develop this one. So in words of Benjamin Traynor, the good SRE is a person with an obsession for automation, with avoiding managing tasks in a manually way. So you should have the ability to solve or to automate these tasks. That is really important. And the other side, the curiosity. You have you should be a curious person who asks about what happened with anything. And the other is related with complexity.
Well, that's great. And you covered a broad range from technical skills towards curiosity and inquisitiveness, along with picking up the whole end to end. So it's sometimes very difficult, Yury, then to get SREs because they need to know end to end, and you don't have people who get end to end. Yeah.
Yeah. When I pass to DevOps team, so I feel overwhelmed because there are a lot of topics, there are a lot of technologies. So in the past, I was working as a software developer. So I manage topics related with programming languages and designing systems and managing features. But that is a different world because you have to manage all things. That is really challenging, but that is really funny. That is funny. That is a crazy journey, but I enjoy a lot to practice as SRE topics.
Excellent. So the next question is, we talk about this term called service level objectives, which is more towards user experience. Now, many of the clients that we deal with, they don't have everything within their own control, right? There are a distributed ecosystem. So what is your experience on setting up SLOs, SLIs for a distributed ecosystem? Because it's not under, everything is under our control. So there is a level of abstract, could be even a cloud provider. So how do we define SLOs in a distributed ecosystem?
Yeah, so the first thing that is challenging is to understand what is an SLE, SLA, SLO, and SLI. Because I found that there are many people, for example, providing or building monitoring dashboards. That is a great dashboards, but they don't understand that dashboards because they don't the users don't understand. The users don't understand what is an SLO. So the first thing to set up this one is really important to understand what is an SLA, an SLO, an SLI. Because if you understand that and if you understand the metrics, you can provide a proper way to monitor your system. So I would like to share those definitions because I would like to think in anything that you need to understand what are you doing, and after that you provide or automate or define about that. So it's really important to understand SLAs are the key measurements of the ability of a system. I'm talking about, for example, latency or freshness or quality that is related with words that define your system. Latency, response times, that is SLA. And regarding to SLO, that is related to objectives about this. So when you are talking about SLOs, you are talking about goals. Goals you set for how much ability for availability we or you expect out of a system, and that is the famous SLO related to availability, because when you are contracting or a provider, for example, that provide a service, it's really important to understand what or how long the system is available during a month or during a year. So that is really important to understand the difference between them. That is, the first one is related to a word that defines your system, and the second one, the SLOs, is related to a goal about this word. So considering this, I would like to follow a recipe, although all systems are different, and considering that is this a distributed system or not a distributed system, that they are different. They are different because your company has different requirements about the business, about the stakeholders, about the expectation of the users.
Right.
So that is really important to consider that each company is different. But I would like to follow a general recipe that I think could work in order to answer your question related to the setup of the SLAs and SLOs. So the first one is identify the system boundaries within your platform. It's really important to understand what is your dependency with another components out of your architecture. That is really important. Second one, identify the customer-facing capabilities that exist at each system boundary. So that is really important. So third, articulate a plain language definition and manage a common vocabulary. That is really important, but you are communicating something about your system. So it is really critical you manage a shared vocabulary related to your business. So in a fourth step, it is the moment to define one or more SLAs for that definition. So you are considering, for example, availability, response times, latency that you want, and that is related with the no functional requirements for your system. Security, even in security, is proper here. So after that, there is the moment to start measuring to get a baseline. So in the setup, it's really important to define a dashboard, or I don't know, a technique to monitor, considering an exploration or a discovery of your system, because it is important here, understand your system. So
Right.
provide a dashboard to understand what happened with your system, how manage your system a failure or an outage in production. So after that, it is the moment to define SLO, because when you know your system, when you know that, for example, you have a lot of dependencies that you limit or that are constrained for providing a good experience for users in terms, for example, response times, you have to consider that in order to define the goals, because if you have a lot of dependencies, you can define, for example, an SLO for availability with 4 or 5 nights.
Correct.
Because your infrastructure has a lot of dependencies that restrict these values or these numbers. So after that, once you have defined the SLOs, it's important to iterate and iterate in order to refine these metrics, in order to refine your commitments with your users. And after that, that is a future work, use these SLOs and these results in order to improve your system and provide visibility for your stakeholders related to business. For example, if you need budget to improve anything in your infrastructure or to remove any dependency, you have to at this moment you have a tool in order to justify this budget, for example, with a business stakeholder. So that is my recommendation. My recommendation is consider your system, know your system, and follow this general recipe. And the most important to understand what you are providing in terms of SLAs and SLOs.
Excellent. So we did talk about briefly around the whole aspect of looking at the system boundaries, look at which is under your control, which is not under your control, looking at identifying which is the customer facing capabilities, right? We don't want to do everything around it. And then making sure that you start small, look at the baselines, and then start to look at iteratively to it. So that's a very sound way of looking at, how do we go about implementing SLOs and SLIs in distributed ecosystem. Now, you also talked about, Yury, around the monitoring space. Now, the monitoring space is pretty crowded, right? So you have so many tools for infrastructure monitoring and application monitoring, but we still struggle, right? Because many times these monitoring is only giving you some symptoms. It is not giving you some actionable insights. So is there some best practices around how you monitor both for application and from infrastructure perspective?
Yeah. There are a lot of documentation about this because observability and monitoring is a topic that is it that moment that is really important at this moment. That is the moment, the gold moment for this topic. So there are many providers generating content tools about this. I am talking about Datadog, New Relic, AWS, Google, GCP, and Azure. So many providers of services in cloud are building a lot of repositories with information for that. So if you go to the literature, you can find a lot of best practices for providing monitoring and observability of your system. But as I mentioned in the other questions, the first one is really important to understand the concepts. Understand, for example, what is the difference between the three pillars of monitoring. I am talking about logging, I'm talking about metrics and tracing. That is important to understand what is the difference between them and understand the concepts. That is the first one for best practice. So if you are, for example, training a team for providing a proper strategy for monitoring, it's really important to understand the terms. And in the other side, another recommendations include, for example, identify and monitor the problem areas. That is a best practice. Focus on the problem areas or where you are when you identify it, for example, an issue related with the performance of the application or security, for example, or if you identify a vulnerability, for example, it's really important to focus in there. So it is important to prioritize this one. So in the second best practice is focus on the process, and because the process is really important when you are monitoring, and it's important to understand the system. You should know the system. That is another best practice. For example, in the past, I have experience with teams that there are a team that build the solution, and then there are another team that provide the monitoring strategies. So this person don't understand what happened when your system shows anything here. So or not provide the proper metrics for monitoring. That is the other best practice. Involve all people that participates in the construction of the system. And last one, prepare for a specific monitoring situation. So the idea is to think in the future, think in use cases related to the future. For example, create, for example, a game day, a chaos game day. That is a great strategy for considering or for thinking about bad situations. So think about a situation as a hypothetical situation, but think about this. So when you think about this, you prepare your metrics for that. You prepare your logs for that. You log the proper information in order to solve the issue. So that is my best recommendations. But if you go to internet, for example, you can find a lot of information about this, uh, because as I mentioned, there are a lot of people and a lot of companies working on that. That is really great, because we need more and more information and more studies and more researching about this topic.
Excellent. So you did talk about and touched about a term called chaos engineering because you wanted to test the systems for bad situations and game days. So tell us a little bit about chaos engineering. Is it even reality for organizations to implement chaos engineering? Because we work with a lot of financial services clients, and it's a very highly regulated environment. So people think that chaos engineering is only for Google, Netflix, and Amazons of the world. So how do you think that chaos engineering can be applied by any of the organization who are in the SRE journey?
Yeah. That is right. That is true, and that is a reality in, for example, in Latin America and in Colombia. That is a reality, because the companies, the small companies, startups, or companies that are starting with, for example, a journey to go to the cloud. They think that chaos engineering is for big companies or for another companies, and specifically talking about financial companies, that is really challenging, because they have a lot of things into think that they don't see the value of practicing chaos engineering, for example, because they see the value, probably they see the value, but they have a lot of issues related, they have a lot of chaos with another topics, so they don't prioritize, for example, practicing a discipline. But I think although the definition says that you should consider this discipline for distributed system and distributed systems in production, and when your system is stable, you have an status in which you can trust, or you have the confidence in the system, you can provide a chaos engineering strategy. I don't agree with that, because I think that chaos engineering is about think in the failure. If you think in the failure in your local environment, in your development environment, at this moment you are providing value, because you are preparing for a disaster. You are preparing your activities, your infrastructure, your code, your designs for a failure, and the failure are inevitable. So you should consider that. But if you go to the definition provided in the principle of chaos side, you can find that that is a discipline for a big systems and distributed system and in production. But I think you can practice chaos engineering in any environment. The most important is to think in the failure before this happens.
Excellent. So thanks so much, Yury, for spending time today and sharing your perspectives around the site reliability engineering aspects. I'm sure that you're a passionate site reliability engineer, a chaos engineer part of it. So what are your final thoughts towards the world of SRE? If someone wants to build their career in site reliability engineering, what do you think would be a most appropriate situation at hand? Do they think a promising career, or do you think it is going to be challenging if they have to be an SRE?
Okay, no, first one, thank you very much, because that is, yeah, I love these topics, because I love launch attacks, for example, in your infrastructure. That is really, really crazy and emotional. I I feel a lot of emotion when I am practicing with these topics. So regarding to your question, I think that is challenging, but I think that it's challenging. For example, SRE is a framework that has many years in the industry. If you consider that it was born in Google 2003, you are thinking this has in the market 20 years, almost 20 years.
Yeah.
So that is a framework, a mature framework, and that is challenging. That is challenging, for example, to find talent with abilities, with the skills related to SRE. That is challenging. And that is challenging, for example, to create, and it is expensive to create a team specialized or focused in SRE. But if you practice some recommendations of the frameworks, or you follow some ways to build solutions considering infrastructure and software in your company, I am sure that that provides value. That provides value for your company. So that is challenging, that is expensive if you are starting with this topic. But when you get the information, when you get the proper persons who was here, or fine, you can build these abilities in your team, in your company. That is really valuable. So it is challenging, but I think that is a trade-off that you have to pay in an anticipated way for a thing that provide value in the future, that reduce costs, reduce the times of unavailability of your system, or you improve the experience of your users, and you gain the confidence, the trust, and the confidence of your user. That is really, really valuable for a company if you provide this for the company. And regarding to chaos engineering, that is also challenging. It is a new field, considering that the chaos engineering was born in 2018. So we have been working on that probably 4 years, 3 or 4 years. That is a new topic. So some days I think, I don't know if this has future, but another days when I see, for example, a team in a chaos game day, so I think that we have a lot of things to do. So that is really, really good about this topic, that anything is for to do. We need hands to build tools, strategies, define frameworks, define research about this topic. So I think that we are beginning, and we have a lot of challenge, and probably in some cases you have questions about if it is a proper strategy to build a reliable system. But I am convinced that is yes, and I believe that we have a lot of things to build in this field. And regarding to SRE, I think that that is a mature framework, that is expensive, that is challenging, but that is really, really valuable for your company. So that is my thoughts.
Excellent. So you can see Yury's passionate advocate of site reliability engineering and chaos engineering. Thanks so much for sharing insights on this episode of Site Reliability Practitioners. So if you're listening and if you want to know about the more episodes that are going to be coming over, subscribe to TaUB Solutions, and we'll be more than happy to bring in more practitioners like this in the future. So stay tuned, and thank you so much again, Yury, for your time today.
Oh, thank you so much for this. Thank you so much for this invitation. I really, really appreciate. So if you need anything about SRE or chaos engineering, you can find me in Twitter, in LinkedIn, in Medium as Yury Nino. So yeah, if you want to connect, if you have questions related to this topic, I am really, really happy to help about this.
Thank you so much, Yury.